Friday, and welcome to all to our Friday, I guess it's weekly live stream. We pretty much do this every week, most every week. Welcome all. It's a little later than normal. We're trying a little different time tonight, mostly because I was just too tied up during the day to be able to do our normal live stream. But this is cool. We might reach different people. There might be new people here. So welcome, one and all, and let's dive into it. We had a little bit of hyperbole in the titling today, so it may attract people that I don't know want to comment on it. But in essence, the idea is that Hendrix, if he were alive, would have this gargantuan pedal board. I'll explain more on why that is and why I think that may be true, or at least a plausible hypothesis. And want to go over some of the things that are going to be kind of a party to the stream today. For those of you who don't usually make it or who this is new to, we do a giveaway every 8 minutes typically as part of the live stream. And we have some great sponsors in our friends at Bestronix, our friends over at Diodario. There's some really great items today, so let me go through some of the giveaway items that we're going to see today. We're going to get some Diodario XL 10s, 3-packs, we're going to be giving away today. We also have a 10-foot Bestronix instrument cable with Neutrik ends, ultra low capacitance, great quality instrument cable. We also have a Rig Doctor Tone Essentials kit, which is going to be 20 zip ties and tie-down mounts, all with the same stuff that we use, with a 3M adhesive on the back of those tie-down mounts. And also a potpourri of Diodario picks. There's not a gauge that doesn't exist in this potpourri pack. So, and also, you can express yourself with whatever color you prefer. We also have the Diodario Pro Plus capos today. And lastly, we have the Diodario glass bottleneck slide. I actually feel like I put like 6 things on here, but whatever. Maybe we'll give them all away. So those are the things that we're going to be taking from today for the giveaways. So we'll do that every 8 minutes. I'll start the clock now. And also, we got some other cool stuff that we're going to be talking about that's all about Jimi Hendrix. And this week, we did kind of like a sort of a guesstimation as to what Jimi would be using if he were still alive today. We took a couple of players that kind of had carried the torch sonically from where he had left off and kind of explored what might be used by Jimi Hendrix if he were still around, kind of using those people as our markers. And we had a lot of really great commentary, and continues to be great commentary in the discussion of that particular video in terms of other players that we could have included that maybe were oversights or omissions, which I was happy to hear. Some of them I agreed with. I think that we had some really good ones, like John Frusciante would have been one person that I think certainly in terms of using new stuff, pushing the boundaries of the way to use pedals and the available gear, was certainly a guy in that camp. I think Eric Gales was another person that was mentioned that certainly could have been in that camp, although I would say he's probably more judicious with the pedals that he uses and the amps that he uses, but I think stylistically he could very much fit into that category. A lot of people mention Robin Trower, although I think Robin Trower kind of was fossilized in the early 70s. I mean, every musician progresses, but I think he still kind of was had a lot of fidelity to the sound that he had. So, I thought about him. I didn't include him, but I think that Frusciante was definitely one that could have been added into this that was not included that could have been. So, shout out to John Frusciante. He definitely has a Hendrix vibe, that's for sure. But let's get into some of the stuff that we talked about, and we'll talk a little bit about the video. We'll do some giveaway stuff, and then if you have questions as we go, you're always welcome to put those in the comments or feedback that you have about maybe some of my theories and where they might be warped and where you disagree. And if you like stuff as it comes up, feel free to give us a thumbs up. That might bring other people to the live stream today that wouldn't ordinarily find it. So if you think that it's worthwhile, then give it a thumbs up. And if not, you could give it a thumbs down or no thumbs at all. If you're ambivalent. So let's talk about why I think Jimi Hendrix's rig would have been huge. So, and I mentioned this in the video a little bit. This was the video for this week. What would Hendrix use now? But let me show you. Here's a photo of Hendrix's rig during Woodstock. So, we have, of course, the wah coming in, the Strat coming in, wah, fuzz face, univibe, and we have that going out, and then wide into two Marshall amplifiers and 412 cabinets. Now, from this time, if we're talking about all the effects that Hendrix was known to use on stage, so wah, fuzz, univibe, octave at times, that would have been a really high percentage of the total number of pedals that existed during that time. So if we're thinking about, in the late 60s, judiciously, there was maybe 12 to 15 total pedals even out, maybe even less than that. Let's go really judicious. Let's say there's 10 pedals, maybe even less than that. And he's got 4 to 5 of them on his rig. So in today's numbers, this would be like having, 1,000 pedals on your rig by today's standards. So I think that it was certainly no question that what was out there and available, Hendrix was definitely trying to make the very best use of those effects and implementing them into his rig. So unquestionably, I think Jimi Hendrix would have had a gargantuan rig, whether that was in the 80s with a giant Bradshaw refrigerator rack, or as some people guesstimate now, would have been, using synthesizers or helixes or Kempers, or, really anybody's guess is as good as mine. But I think one thing that we can say is that he was always on the cutting edge, and he was really, really utilizing as much of what was sort of the new kind of thing on the new pedal, the flavor of the month. He was definitely experimenting. And so I think it's really interesting that if we think about when people will say often in comments like, oh, you don't need that many pedals because Hendrix only used 3 pedals, but he used, 3 to 5 pedals out of 10. So it was a pretty good ratio. And so I think that's sometimes a thing that we miss when we're considering his rig. But some of the other guys that we looked at that kind of help us inform where we thought Hendrix might go, we looked at one guy who I think is really in the vibe of Hendrix for sure, lefty like Hendrix, is Doyle Bramhall. And this is a screenshot from one of the Premier Guitar rig rundowns. And, certainly he has the Experience fuzz. That's a huge one. He's got the Zonk machine, which is 2 pedals that we talked about, the Clean Octave blend, the Cobb. He's got some different fuzzes like the Third Stone, and looks like some other Dallas Arbiter fuzz there that's been rehoused. Vintage Vox wah, the Nemesis obviously for delay, a Leslie, a Shinai Vibro, 2 different reverbs. A lot of this stuff we talked about in the context of directions that Hendrix might have gone. And certainly Doyle Bramhall is exemplary of the multiple fuzzes. I mean, this guy's not afraid of fuzz. He's got some sort of rehoused Dallas Arbiter, a Third Stone, an Experience, and a Zonk machine. Most people are not man enough to even use 1 fuzz, let alone 4 on the same rig plus an octave pedal. So certainly Doyle was definitely into the fuzzes. Another guy that we talked about was Kenny Wayne Shepherd. And I know this is like a really small picture of his rig in relativity, but I know they're trying to get the strats and all that stuff in there. But, from what I can see, it's like a Bradshaw custom audio electronics wah. We didn't really talk about that one in particular, but just kind of like a vintage style wah. This is a Tycho Brahe Octavia. It looks like a King of Tone, which we did talk about. Also a Tube Screamer. I think that looks like an Analog Man Chorus. Maybe that's kind of for more of a rotary thing. Looks like a Tube Driver, and then one of the Dunlop Univibes, which are actually a really underrated Univibe. If you want to get a cool Univibe that was like kind of the only game in town back in the day, you had to get one of those Dunlop ones. They also had one that was like a foot pedal controlled one that was red. I think Zach Wilde used to use one too. And Kenny Wayne's rig has changed over time. Now he's definitely using the Sir Henry. And shout out to Dustin Sears, who makes that vibe pedal. Also was involved with the Shinai Vibro. But Kenny Wayne definitely, I think things that we could have definitely think Hendrix might use would definitely in this rig. I mean, certainly the King of Tone could have been in there. I think certainly the Tube Screamer would have been in there. Stevie Ray as being any indication of a Hendrix fanatic. you're definitely gonna. I think we definitely would have seen a tube screamer in a Hendrix rig if he were still alive. Perhaps even the King of Tone, or derivative of that, the Marshall Blues Breaker. All really good choices. Again, if you disagree or you have things to add, throw that in the comments. I really do want to hear from you about what you think he would be using, if maybe not a derivative of a tube screamer itself, if not an octave, what would he be using? Another good one that a lot of people put was the whammy. And I think that's actually kind of right on. I definitely think Hendrix would have been using a whammy. It seems like so logical that he would be experimenting with that sort of stuff. But it is time for our first giveaway. The clock just wound down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a question up on the screen, and you're going to respond to the question in the chat. The first person to answer it correctly as it comes in on my end, that may be slightly different than what comes in on your end, is going to win our very first prize item, which is going to be, what is it going to be? It's going to be a Rig Essentials kit. We're going to give you a 20-pack of tie-down mounts and zip ties shipped straight to your door, free of charge, wherever you live in the world. So if you answer this question correctly, you are going to win this item. Make sure that you put your answer in the chat. Get your typing fingers ready. The question is, name 3 pedals that Jimi Hendrix was famous for using. Name 3 pedals that Jimi Hendrix was famous for using. Three pedals that Jimi Hendrix was famous for using. What were 3 pedals that Jimi Hendrix was famous for using? And it looks like our friend here, James. James, I thought, James, you were the first one to answer, but I need the first one that answers the correct answer. It looks like Jeremy Baker. Fuzz, wah, and octave. I think that these are all acceptable answers. Certainly the fuzz face, certainly the vox wah, certainly the octave as it was made by Roger Mayer. Jeremy Baker, you win this first one. Make sure that you email Mejia. I'm going to put his email in the chat. And go ahead and throw him an email, and he'll make sure you get that Tone Essentials kits. Congrats to you. And if you didn't win, we're going to start another 8 minutes over. We're going to do some more giveaways in 8 minutes, so stay tuned. All right. So we were talking about Kenny Wayne Shepherd. Let's talk about another one that we talked about in the video. We talked about Philip Sayce. This guy is an incredible player. So Philip's got a little bit. His board is really spread out, but definitely incorporates some cool vintage stuff. So of course we got the Vox Wah up front. Absolutely need to have that. He also has the classic fuzz face, the Dallas Arbiter fuzz face. He's also got the Cesar Diaz Texas square face. We mentioned that in the video as well. He's got the Chicago Iron Octavia, great Octavia. I have that one. I also have the Dunlop one that's kind of in the shape of a cheese wedge. And here's another one that we talked about a little bit, is the Klon coming into the picture. I suggested that Stevie Ray would definitely be a Klon user. I suspect that Hendrix as a Strat player would have also likely been a Klon user. Those work so well with Strats and cleaner type amplifier platforms. We see the KR Mega Vibe, another great vibe that's out there, and a vintage Tube Screamer, of course. I definitely think that Hendrix would have been a Tube Screamer user. Presumably he would have used a tuner as well. We see that the tuner is one of the unnamed items on that pedal board. And then you see a Keeley looper above the Tube Screamer, and I suppose that's to control the Echoplex so that you're able to bring that in and out so that it doesn't have any noise in the system when it's unnecessary. Those do have a preamp, of course, that some people like, but the consequences can also be problematic. They're not particularly efficient line drivers or anything like that. But I certainly think of Hendrix's rig. I think of things that we don't already know that Hendrix used. I think certainly the Tube Screamer would be on there. I think definitely the Centaur would have been on there. in terms of things that he would have used. And Hendrix was using, I know in the studio, was supposedly using Echoplexes. Maybe you would have seen that become more of a staple on his rig. He would have used live potentially. That could have been very cool. So that is Philip Sace's rig. And let's see, what else did we talk about? We talked about some other cool pedals that didn't necessarily. We talked about Michael Landau as well and some cool pedals that he introduced. We also talked about there's a Robert Bradshaw like Custom Audio Japan sort of like launch video thing that was documented by somebody in Tokyo. I think it was in Tokyo, I'm pretty sure. And Landau is like playing all these like Hendrix tunes and, showing the capabilities of the rack. And so it's like a more modern tone for sure. But I think Landau is one of the most underrated or under the radar Hendrix, like can really do that stuff so great. And most people don't think about that when they're thinking about guys that can really nail like the Hendrix sound. Like if you listen to any of those Raging Honkies records, it just oozes Hendrix tone, like Strat and Marshalls, and it's pretty incredible. So I highly recommend if you're in to the Hendrix vibe, you definitely check that out because man, it's an incredible sound, really good. But let's go through one of the other. I brought a few of the pedals that we talked about that I had handy here at my my home office. And a couple of which we mentioned in the video. One of them is the Experience pedal, which is also on Doyle Bramhall's rig. Another one that I have here handy is the Sir Henry, which is a really nice vibe. And then also we have the Voodoo 1, which is something that Michael Landau kind of is been very well known to use, and also Roger Mayer being the technician for Jimi Hendrix certainly is somebody that knew a thing or two about good tones. So I got a couple of these. We can kind of mess with them a little bit if you guys are interested in hearing them. And I can I'm no Jimi Hendrix, but I do have a Strat and I have a Fender amp, and we could definitely play around with some of that if that's of interest to people. If they just kind of want to hear what's going on there. Certainly, there's a lot of great univibes out there. I can see that our buddy Nico is here from Sabatius, who also makes an incredible vibe. And in fact, shout out to Nico right here. We just did a Univibe video where we were showing some of our favorite Univibes with which his are included in. We compared that and the Full Tones and the Black Cat vibe and the Sir Henry. And man, there's so many. This is a good time to buy a Univibe if you want something that's really legit and really sounds the part. So we can mess around with a little bit of that if you guys want. But I think that's kind of the extent to which we went over some of the pedals, some of the gear, what guys were using, who we used as sort of our exemplars to kind of inform what we thought Hendrix might be using. So I think that covers a decent amount. I want to leave plenty of time for questions, rig-related questions, pedalboard-related questions, and also your feedback about things that you think he might have used that we didn't cover, or other players that carried the torch that maybe we didn't mention here. Obviously, we couldn't mention every single player that ever sort of embodied the vibe of Hendrix. That would be an impossible task. But we try to pick some of the highlights and sort of involve those in the conversation so that we would have a good representative sample of guys that were doing the thing, that were carrying the torch of Hendrix forward. So if you have suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. If you have rig-related issues, troubleshooting problems, if you want to challenge any of the findings that we posted about in the video, certainly put those in the chat, and we'd be happy to talk about that. And Jonathan Hull is already saying he agrees that our title is true about Hendrix having a huge rig, flash in the pan, also agreeing that it would be massive. Hey, Dan. Hey, Wayne, Vince, and Wayne saw Hendrix 3 times. So you're probably in a small group of people, certainly a small group of people that are on this chat, I would presume, just understanding the age of the average YouTuber. What's going on, Bent Tom? Yeah, and David getting to join. And Bent Tom won a capo 2 weeks ago, so it is real. When we do these giveaways, people actually do get them. And Mark Holt tuning in from Ohio. New Jersey, Milpitas, almost local. Here from Sydney. All right, a long way. And Jeremy asks how do I think Jimmy's music would have changed if he were still here with us? I think it's impossible to speculate, but I think a lot of people in the comments I noticed thought that he would have really gotten a lot more experimental, and a lot of people referenced like other musical geniuses like Miles Davis and people like that, and kind of use that as a jumping off point to say that he would have gotten more experimental. Miles Davis got into hip hop music at one point, so it's quite possible that he would have been very experimental. Who knows? Yeah, jazz definitely. Maybe even hip hop. There's one person I think in the comments that wrote dubstep. So there are many opinions as to where this might have gone. Let's see. And Mark believes that he would have veered from the Strat. Maybe. But everybody comes back home, as they say, Mark. So hopefully he would have come back to his Strat. And it is time for another giveaway. We just elapsed another 8 minutes. So we're going to do another giveaway question again. Once I put the question up, do make sure that you put your answer in the chat. I will choose the first person that answers the chat correctly. Or answers correctly in the chat. Let's go ahead and do that. Make sure you get your typing fingers ready. If you're digging what you're seeing so far, you're finding this conversation enlightening, it's giving you joy on a Friday evening, be sure to give us a thumbs up. That helps us with the YouTube gods and the algorithm. I know what you're saying. How did Al Gore get involved with the algorithm? I don't know, but do help us by giving us a thumbs up and supporting our friend Al Gore with the algorithm, that is. All right. Who was Jimi Hendrix's tech? I mentioned it even on the stream a little bit. Who was Jimi Hendrix's tech? I know that over time, I suppose he had more than one, but who's his most notable tech, let's say? Who was making guitar pedals, even to this day? Who's Jimi Hendrix's guitar tech? He's known for his pedals, even to this day. He's still alive. My favorite answer, although not correct, is this one, John Mayer. John Mayer was his tech in embryonic fashion. And I think I see Matt, Roger Mayer, Old Man Mayer, not John Mayer, no relation, or at least not that I know of. And here's a picture of one of his pedals that Michael Landau uses, the Voodoo One. They're all very kind of industrial looking, although for a while they had kind of this really avant-garde, kind of like Art Deco look to them for a while. I think they've kind of restored to kind of more of a traditional look. But Matt, congratulations. You won. And this second item is for the, let's see, that is for the Pro Plus Capo. So you're going to get a free Pro Plus Capo sent right to your door. Congratulations. And I'll throw Mejia's email in the chat right now. Mejia at vertexeffects.com. So make sure that you hit him up if you're the winner. And if you didn't win, don't worry, because we have another giveaway happening in 8 minutes. So let's keep going. All right, let's see. He would dig a nice reverse delay. I mean, he was definitely already digging it in some of the albums he already put out. He definitely had already reverse delay. I think James Porch was noticing the Dynaverb on Doyle Bramhall's rig, the EBS. Let's pull that up again. Just take another look. Right there in the top right-hand corner, a great reverb. I think that those are made in Denmark, somewhere in the Nordic country. They're really nice. But also that Spring Chicken to the left of that, those are really cool too. I remember that those were like the hip spring reverb pedals in like the early days of Pro Guitar Shop. Everybody wanted the Spring Chicken. It was just a single knob. I'm pretty sure it was digital reverb. Everybody was into that, but for sure, definitely Dynaverb was a winner. Thanks for joining us, Adam F. Be nice to see what Hendrix would do with an Eventide H9 and all the super nice fuzz pedals there are now. I mean, but arguably a lot of them are still, based on the classical, fuzz face and tone benders and things of that nature. But certainly there's some cool stuff. You'd love to hear Hendrix through a 100-watt high watt. I think everybody would. That would have been a cool thing. Not to jump tracks, but would Hendrix still be playing the Fender? I want to know what people think in the chat. Do you think he still would have been playing a Fender? I think that this is a good question. Certainly we saw evidence that he had used a Flying V, SGs, Les Pauls. We saw some different stuff. I think the most notable, obviously, appearances are always with the Strat. I think that there's a lot of evidence to say that he would still possibly be using a Strat. Other players experiment, but, again, as I said, everybody comes back home. So, it's interesting. I mean, if anybody has any ideas as to what they think he might have used, a lot of people in the chat or in the comment section of the video thought he might use a Floyd Rose because he was such an aggressive tremolo bar user, and so he would be ecstatic to have something that could do all of the acrobatics of the tremolo bar without having the tuning stability issues. So it is possible maybe he would have had a Charvel for all we know. Yeah, I think that there's things about Eric Johnson. Although I would say Eric Johnson is certainly more controlled. I'm open to anybody going against that, but Eric Johnson, it seems like his game is so about precision, and Jimi Hendrix is almost like a stream of consciousness. And I mean that in the most endearing way possible. Yeah. Yusef, what's up? Do you like treble boosters, and would you put a treble booster before or after or before a wah and a fuzz? I do. I have a what's the brand called? The BSM. I'm looking at it right now. That's a great one. I like it through Marshall amps in particular. And sometimes actually with that AC30, I think it works out pretty well through the normal channel actually. And I think that they're great. I usually use them after fuzz and after wah, but before any sorts of buffers, especially if it's like a vintage style treble booster. I think it does a lot better, obviously if there's a buffer after it, not before it, just like, any other impedance sensitive device. All right. What's going on, Troy? I don't know what RF guru is. Are you talking about RF like noise RF? I got a question. Would he use the pedals that bear his name, Dunlop Pedals Digitech? I mean, it's possible. I mean, obviously that happened after his death, so that was some agreement, I think, with the Jimi Hendrix estate, not with Jimi himself. So who knows? I thought like there was some sort of like funny Jimi Hendrix like signature thing at one of the NAMM shows, and I don't know if it actually ever released because it was taking so much flack. But it was something silly like a Jimi Hendrix like wireless system or Jimi Hendrix in-ears or something like that. Like some sort of product that couldn't have possibly ever existed in parallel with when he was alive. So maybe that was an overreach as far as attaching his name to something. Like, I don't know how they would sell the Jimi Hendrix in-ears, like, unless it was like what he would have used if he were still alive. So who knows? And David had a Voodoo 1 for a while, and you sold it. I think it's a great pedal. I love the Voodoo 1. It's so nice. You need 2 for Bridge of Sighs. And you want one of Nico's Funky Vibes. Yeah, and the Mojo Vibe is great. I think you're going to like the Funky Vibe a lot better. It does that real double pulse thing really well, and there's very few that do it right. And Nico's is one of them, so I highly recommend that. Prince killed his Purple House in When Doves Cry. Yeah. Let's see. Hello from the Oregon coast. Would Jimmy buffer or not buffer? That's the question. Well, technically, I mean, it wasn't the best buffer in the world, but he was getting buffering from, when he would cancel the Univibe. So there would be some buffering provided through that. But he was definitely no stranger to capacitance. But, I think guys didn't really realize it. I think if they knew how to do it better, they would have. They were sort of operating within the limitations that they had. And also, apparently, and we don't have really any proof of this other than the word of Roger Mayer, but Roger was apparently doing stuff to the rig and the pedal setup to try to make it a little bit more consistent night to night. Apparently, the Marshalls had some modifications and stuff like that were done to them. So, who knows? And Troy suggested we be making scores. I presume he means for movies and things like that. Yes, it is a great idea. It could be. We could flesh this out further potentially in a podcast. That might be a nice way to go about it, or to even talk about this in a longer form. And it says my voice is really low. I'm coming in right now at -9, which is about as hot as I can take it before it starts clipping. I can throw it up slightly. This is coming in now about -4. About -4 now. Coming in a little. Somebody was saying that it felt like Scott was saying it was a little low. Brought up slightly. Usually try to keep it around -9 and -12, just for those who are wondering. Let's see. Octave divider would have been his next thing. Then distortion pedals, envelope filters. Yeah, definitely. Some people said that they thought he might get into envelope filters like Jerry Garcia. I think that actually, in some ways, Jerry Garcia's trajectory might have been an interesting parallel to what Jimi Hendrix would have done. In that he was pretty experimental, and the Grateful Dead generally were using a lot of the cutting edge technology at the time. Their involvement with Meyer Sound, like all that stuff, that would be an interesting sort of revisionist history to talk about. We are up for another giveaway. Again, if you are new, you just chimed in here recently, the way that the giveaway is going to work, a question will come up on the screen. If you're the first person to answer that on the screen that comes in on my end, you will win a prize. And the prize for our third giveaway question this time is going to be a glass bottleneck slide from our friends over at Diadario. First person to answer this correctly is going to win that free glass bottleneck slide. Let's do it. Question is, what model of Marshall amplifier did Hendrix use the most? What model of Marshall amplifier did Jimi Hendrix use the most? I feel like we can kind of know this, but not like fully know this, because there could be some. I feel like I'll accept a few answers on this one. Well, I think there's a couple of different answers that could exist here. I think you could say a Marshall Plexi, you could say a Super Lead, you could say a JTM 45. The degree to which they were all used. He had a 3-year career, and we only know what we saw. It wasn't like there was social media to track down his every rig in which Marshall he was using. So because I talked about 6 giveaway items, I'm actually going to give away 2 here because we have an extra one. So I'm going to give a glass bottleneck slide to Scott Brockway, and to Jeremy Baker, I'm going to give. Let's see. I'm going to give one of our pick potpourris too. So you'll get a set of picks there, Jeremy. So everybody, those 2 guys are going to win something, because I think there could potentially be more than one right answer to this. I'm going to go ahead, give both those guys one. Go ahead and send Mejia an email at mejia@vertexeffects.com. Let him know that you won, and he'll make sure that those get to you by next week. But let's keep going. I'm going to reset the clock. We're going to keep rolling. All right, let's see. And I agree with you, Scott. I think the Floyd Rose would definitely be on there. Marcus says, well, we thought John Mayer would stay on Fender, but who knows if Jimmy would. Yeah, I mean, for all we know, Jimmy could be playing a PRS, or as Troy said, a custom guitar just like Prince. And James saying he would have had a locking nut for sure. And Mike McCready from Pearl Jam, definitely inspired by Jimmy. Yeah, I think that that's true. I think that the guys that I was choosing more of in this could be certainly a bias on my part, like Philip Sayers, Doyle Bramhall, Kenny Wayne Shepherd. I guess Kenny Wayne Shepherd doesn't technically sing, but he like fronts the band. They're like their own band leaders. I know some of them would do sideman stuff, like Doyle Bramhall, obviously with Eric Clapton and Sheryl Crow. And Philip Sayers for a time with Melissa Etheridge, but they're also like their own solo artists, so they're like singing, they're doing performances under their own names. I kind of thought as Mike McCready is he wasn't really a front man like Hendrix in that way, but I think certainly, and I think you could argue the same with Frusciante as well. Although I think he had his own solo thing after he left the Chili Peppers, or maybe even concurrently. What do I think about vintage Boss pedals versus Bosses modded by Keeley or Analog Man? Well, I think mostly what Keeley and Analog Man were doing were sort of improving upon what they thought were shortcomings of some of the vintage or standardized Boss pedals. So I think, even I think Analog Man or Keeley, if you gave them a really rare or vintage Boss pedal, they probably wouldn't do very much to it, or nothing that would devalue its authenticity. So maybe if it was a vintage CE1, I don't think they're going to completely gut that thing. They're probably going to maybe convert it to true bypass, maybe clean it up a little bit, but they're not going to like ruin the pedal sort of thing. I think what their focus was more on, taking something that maybe had some noise, maybe had a little bit unfavorable EQ in a certain situation, just kind of smooth it out or kind of make it more, or convert it to be more vintage authentic. So I think that there's merit in what they do. I think that there's merit in vintage Boss pedals. I think it just depends on what the pedal is, and if it's not providing you the thing that you want. Certainly you could get a mod and help improve it in some cases. And shout out Gabby Bergman. Seymour Duncan gave him some rewound pickups. I haven't heard this story, but I believe it. Papa Chubby, very inspired by the Jimmy tone. And Mark saying he would have used 100-watt amps. Yeah, no mention of Ernie Isley. Well, I think Ernie Isley influenced him. I don't know that necessarily Ernie Isley was doing what Hendrix was doing. I guess, certainly he got into fuzz. He was using more like big muffs and phasers and flangers. Yeah, I kind of see their band trajectories being different, though, from the Isley brothers versus what Jimi Hendrix was doing. But I guess I can see that there was a connection there. I think that's a fair point. And you think he might have used Fender amps? Yeah, I think he definitely would have used Fender amps. We put some pictures in the video that showed him. I think it was using a Showman or something like that. So I think he definitely was using Fender amps, even though that wasn't what he was known to use on stage. I think there was definitely that stuff. No, he didn't have a pedal board, but he certainly had a lot of pedals relative to what was out then. So I think it was only a matter of time. What drugs would Jimmy be using today? Well, he'd be 79, so, Flomax probably. But who knows? See, my board is 39 by 15. Hard to size down when you use a volume, expression, and wah. Well, depending on how it is that you're using it, and whether it's a switcher or not, certainly building up, like using the tiered systems like we use, that can help. You can also get custom, tiers made to the size that you need that would accommodate your combination of wah, expression, volume. You could also consider getting smaller expression and volume pedals, like some of those Dunlop mini, or kind of the mid-size one, the new X8 one, I think it's called. I think it's like an 8-inch depth, so it's kind of somewhere in between the full-size Volume X and then like the mini Volume X. Two of those are pretty compact. You get a more compact wall, like an Exotic or something like that. That becomes more favorable. And you could always build up with a kind of a tiered system. Not even necessarily that it's ours, but just the tiered system in general allows you to kind of maximize that surface area so that you can have as much space as you need. Everybody wants to know what happened to the parts of the Strat he set on fire. I don't know. Probably somebody's got them. Aiden, how do people get in contact with you to build boards? Well, I don't build them, but we are going to start offering pedalboard building services through some trusted individuals that we've kind of recruited, and we're actually in many cases already doing this on their own, but just in kind of a smaller capacity, more of a homegrown sort of thing. And so we're kind of going through the process with some of those people, and we're going to start offering those services of like Rig Doctor approved builds that are going to be made by people that we trust and that we know will do a really great job for you. And so that's going to be something on the horizon, probably in the next few weeks, actually. So you're welcome to get in touch with us over at the Rig Doctor website, excuse me, which is info@therigdr.com. I'll throw it down in the chat. And we can start talking to you about what's possible, and we can proceed from there. But yeah, that will be something that we're going to offer. We're going to make a video, I think, about it shortly once we kind of have the specifics nailed down, so people know that this is now an available service. Formerly, I was just referring people out, but we really want to make sure that we're providing a high quality service. And when we reference people out, we do the best we can, but ultimately we're not kind of in control of that result anymore. And so we wanted to start bringing in some people that can help supplement that, because I don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that with running Vertex during the day, and making videos and all that stuff. So trying to do the best that I can to continue to put out good stuff for you. Let's see. Jimmy would have made Amiku sound like a clown. That would be an interesting party trick. I guess he would be using a dumbbell. Everybody's using it in some way, and somehow, yeah. Well, maybe. Dweezil Zappa, perhaps. Vince knows what I'm talking about when it comes to good pedal boards. We are down on time again for our next giveaway question. So let's go to that. Question number 4. For number 4 today, we're going to be giving away another set of the pick potpourri, every gauge pick that you could ever desire in all different colors. This is for, to basically fill out your pick needs for the next year. You're going to be completely full of picks, not going to need any other ones. So let's do this. Question number 4. Get your typing fingers ready. Let's do it. In what year was Jimi Hendrix's Olympic White Strat produced? And I don't know who it was last time, but don't just start putting all sorts of years in sequence. You got to guess it right. You get one shot. What year was Jimi Hendrix's Olympic White Strat produced? There was one guy last time who was like, 61, 62, 63, 64. Just like when, So I'm open to being wrong on this, but from what we looked up, I think Vince has got it. It is a 68 Olympic White Strat. 68. Transition year, kind of the later transition when it was CBS. It was a 68 Olympic White Strat. And there's a hysterical story about this. So congrats to Vince. Vince, make sure that you hit up Mejia about getting all those pics sent to you. I'm going to throw his email in the chat. But a funny story about this that I was listening to a story from a great guitar player named Greg V. And Greg used to tour with Buddy Miles, who was the drummer in Band of Gypsies. And Greg had told this story about how when they would go on tour that Buddy would go to Guitar Center and would buy all the Olympic white Strats that were in the store. And when they would do meet and greets, he would sort of size up, gullible individuals backstage and would say, I really like you, and, won't you come over to the tour bus? I have something that I want to show you, and so he'd go under the tour bus and he'd pull out this brand, what he knew was a brand new Olympic white Strat that didn't, even have like the right headstock or any of that stuff, and would proceed to tell this person that was at the meet and greet, he's like, well, I really like you, and this was pristine. This was played once at Woodstock. Jimmy played this Strat, and I'll sell it to you, for a song, like $5,000 or something. I don't know what the price was, but it was something that was like too good to be true. And apparently, he sold that guitar, every few stops on the road. So, there may be other guys out there that think that they have Jimmy's Woodstock Strat that they got from Buddy Miles, and it turns out it's just a 1995 American Standard or whatever it was. But it was, it was terrible but funny. So that was his Buddy Miles story. And I think he told it also to like on some sort of podcast as well. But I remember him saying it to me and I think it was like Reinhold Bogner or somebody else. He was telling us about it one time, and I just thought it was a funny story. So, they're 68 in reality, but depending on who you are, it might be a 95 Strat. We're gonna do one more giveaway in 8 minutes, and then we'll wrap up. Our last giveaway item, just so you can set your expectations, is going to be for an instrument cable from our friends over at Bestronix, a 10-footer with Neutrik ends. So get ready for that. In 8 minutes, we'll be giving that away. Make sure that if you have any other questions, you throw those in the chat. We'll do our best to get to them before we complete today. In Fender 5150, I think a lot of players that had played a Les Paul had to try the PRS out. PRSs are great. I have a David Grissom, a gold DGT. It's a great guitar. Sold for 237,000 pounds in 2012. Wow. I wonder how much the Buddy Miles ones are going for. Manny says he never tried the mini pedals. Just have to see how the sweep is and feels compared to the full size. Well, most of them, especially that 8 one that I'm talking about, the Dunlop, we're getting back to the expression pedal, volume pedal conversation. The 8s are pretty good. My buddy Bradford Mitchell over at Worship Tutorials had sent in one, and it felt great. And the thing that I love about the Dunlop volume pedal for a passive one is that it's just about as well built as you can make a passive volume pedal in terms of the mechanical aspect. And they do a really good job of those magnetic sliders, so there's just as little friction as possible. And so it really cuts down on the common issues that we see with volume pedals and where they fail over time. So that's a plus. I'm thinking about getting an amp upgrade. Looking for Mayer SRV tone. I want your thoughts on my planned Deluxe Reverb 68 Custom. I want to stop the speaker for a 2-Rock TR65B speaker and add some JJ tubes. Well, I think that the more important thing is what's your budget, because I think a new 68 Custom or the 68 Custom Deluxe Reverb or whatever it is, the Silverface one, I think they're like $1,200 maybe. You could buy like a Silverface, Fender amp for probably that same amount. So I would try to actually get like a real vintage like Fender amp, like from the 70s or even the Rivera era 80s stuff is excellent. Still hand wired. The concerts are incredible. And some of them have an EVM 12L. Some of them have, I think, a Classic Lead 80 in them, or a G1275, I think. Those are excellent. The Deluxe Reverb 2, excellent. His Princeton 2, excellent. It's like the only Fender amp that ever had channel switching that sounded amazing. Paul Revere is a genius and is probably one of the best amp builders in the world, and probably one of the most underrated amp builders in the world. If you're going to spend $1,200, I think you can get. I could find you a Rivera era concert for $800 or less right now. They're amazing amps. I would look for one of those. A Rivera concert combo already has a great speaker. The Two Rock one is kind of like their interpretation of a G1265, and I think it's made by Eminence or Warehouse or somebody like that. But I find that the G1265s are not that good as 112s. They work really well as a 212. I don't like them so much as 112. The bass response to me is a little weird. So I actually think, hot take, best 112 speakers for Fender amps, Celestion Classic Lead 80 is the best. Nobody likes them for like big amps, like the Mesa Boogies, I think had them for a while. But 112s, that was a Tom Bukovac recommendation, by the way. Great speaker. Thomas Blug, yeah, he does. Yeah, he kind of has that vibe. The Blug Man. I still think that Thomas Blug should play in the Blug Man group. What wattage soldering iron do you recommend? I'm not sure what the wattage is of the one that I have, but I'm using a Weller, and it's linked in most of our videos, like the soldering iron. I like Wellers. I like Heikos. And usually for most stuff, I'm maybe like around 600 or 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Adjustable temp is good. Big question is, would Hendrix have moved to PV amps? Some of them are good. I have a Eddie Van Halen 5150 PV right here. It sounds great. The clean channel kind of sucks, but the lead channel is incredible. For solder, I'm usually using like a .08 6040 Kester Manny. I think that's also linked in the same description I talked about. I wonder how many of these legends will be using AxeFX now. AxeFX can be great. I have an AxeFX right here, and I have it running as a wet-dry context. So I have guitar goes into my Deluxe Reverb, that's what I'm running now. I have a Deluxe Reverb 64, real one. Line out goes from that. That's mic'd like under my house. That comes in as the dry, and then the line out feeds the AxeFX, and then that has all the processing effects. And so I'm getting those 100% wet left and right, like hard pan left and right, and then the Deluxe Reverb clean is in the center. And it sounds great for processing stuff like that. But I don't know that I'd use it as the only thing. I think it sounds better when I have the tube amp. But if I'm using it as a power amp cabinet simulation plus, I've got it dialed in with like a 2290 and like a PCM style reverb. I can play it if you want to hear it. It's pretty good. Let's see how this goes. So this is just Strat, and then I think it's just delay and reverb. It's pretty good. That's all the delay and reverb. That's all AxeFX. Have you used a Morningstar ML5 MIDI controllable loop switcher? I have. I did a rig with a HX Effects maybe a year ago. You can check that out. It's cool. It's like one. It's a great product. I have no complaints about it. How do you like the Mesa Boogie California Tweed? Mesa Boogie makes great stuff, man. Their amps are solid. I just wish they would make the Lone Star as a clean channel only. If they made that, I'd buy it immediately. It's a great clean channel. The Lone Star is an amazing clean channel. All right. It is time for our last giveaway question of the evening. If you dig what we were doing today, our conversation, if you felt like you got your question answered, or you felt like other people were getting their questions answered, even if you didn't have one, we really appreciate it if you give us a thumbs up. That goes a long way in helping us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And maybe somebody else will find this channel that previously didn't know about it. You can help them find it by helping us optimize in that way. Let's do the last question. Make sure you put your answer in the chat. Here we go. Last question. How many studio albums did Jimi Hendrix release over his short career? I think it was like roughly 3 years. How many studio albums did Jimi Hendrix release in his short career? These were ones like while he was. We're gonna restrict it to when he was still alive. I think there's been like, you know, obviously other ones that have come out after his death. What is your answer? And the answer should be 3. The first to come in with 3 was Chris Lee. So, Chris, you're going to win that Bestronix cable today. Congratulations to you for winning. And we'll get that sent right over to you. Make sure that you hit up Mejia. I'm going to put his email in the chat here, Mejia@vertexeffects.com. If you dig what we talked about today, if you found it helpful, useful, please do again. Make sure you give us a thumbs up. That goes a long way. If you didn't get your question answered and you want to make sure that it gets answered, take this time right now to go and find that question, highlight it, copy it, and then when the stream ends, I believe that the comment section just magically appears, and you can just paste your comment right there, and I'll make sure that I use some time this weekend to make sure that I get to those. And I'd be happy to answer that for you. Everybody have a fantastic weekend. Have fun, eat good food, drink good stuff, stay healthy, stay safe, and we will see you next week. Got a new video coming out next week. I think we got a soldering tutorial actually coming out next week, which is an updated soldering tutorial from some of our older stuff. That's how to do every conceivable instrument cable. So you could, teaches you all the common types of plugs from Neutrik to Switchcraft, and how to optimize sort of your approach to soldering based on the cable that you're using and the type of plug that you've chosen. And so the techniques are always slightly different, and so this is going to give a really generalized overview for like all the common cable types and all the common plug types. So I think it'll be a good follow-up to some of the stuff that we've already put out there. So hopefully you'll watch that next week. Go check out that Hendrix video that we published this last week. What would Jimi Hendrix use now? Thank you again for joining us, and have a great weekend. See you later.